André Breton's Surrealist Manifesto of 1924 is an early attempt to set the agenda for and subtly claim leadership of the Surrealist movement by a major figure within that movement. Born in Normandy in 1896, Breton became a medical student focusing on mental illness. During World War I, he worked in a neurological ward where he met a man of his own age, Jacques Vaché, with whom he hammered out his ideas on surrealism. Vaché died in 1919 from an opium overdose. Breton went on to become a poet, essayist, and cultural theorist. In 1924, however, Breton's leadership of the Surrealist movement was disputed by a slightly older French-German poet called Ivan Goel. Goel had published a manifesto of his own 2 weeks before Breton's. Both their approaches were grounded in the work of the innovative poet and playwright Guillaume Apollinaire, who had originally coined the term surrealism and who in 1917 had produced a play called The Breasts of Tiresias, which claimed to be surrealist. Apollinaire had been wounded in World War I, and he died in 1918 during the Spanish flu epidemic, so he wasn't available to arbitrate the dispute between Breton and Goel. The other big influence on surrealism was Dada, an ambitious artistic movement and partly an anti-war movement that rejected methodical creativity, aesthetic norms and logic, and which had begun in Zurich or possibly Romania during World War I. The origins of the term Dada are obscure, but it was probably intended as a nonsense word. Like the Surrealists, the early Dadaists also wrote manifestos. The German anarchist poet Hugo Ball and the Romanian performance artist Tristan Tzara wrote competing declarations between 1916 and 1920. And like Breton and Goel, they ended up at loggerheads. Whereas Goel's 1924 Surrealist Manifesto emphasized cubism and supernaturalism, Breton's was Freudian. He'd met Freud in 1921, stressing dreams, the unconscious, and automatic writing. Breton's 1924 manifesto wasn't his position for long. In 1927, he joined the Communist Party, and in 1929, he produced a revised manifesto which seemed to advocate shooting random passers-by in the street, and which earned him the disdain of Albert Camus. He was expelled from the party 4 years later and eventually became an anarchist, but not before writing yet another manifesto, the Manifesto for an Independent Revolutionary Art, in collaboration with Leon Trotsky in 1938. He died in Paris in 1966 at the age of 70. What makes his 1924 manifesto interesting today is firstly its longevity, the curious fact of its relative renown while all of its competitors have long since been forgotten. Secondly, there's the interest value of surrealism itself. The movement gave birth to both letterism and situationism, although both formally rejected it. And thirdly, it's recognizably behind many forms of radical art today, all based on the notion that art has the power to disturb and disrupt and can potentially have political effects. The Dadaists and the Surrealists weren't by any means the first to write manifestos. The French painter Gustave Courbet had produced a realist manifesto in 1855, and the Greek poet Jean Moreas had produced a symbolist manifesto in 1886. Nor were they the last. Indeed, it became normal for artists to write manifestos. In 2011 and 2017, Penguin published 2 collections of 100 such documents each. Nowadays, they're commonplace. Which perhaps prompts 2 questions. Firstly, how many different forms of artistic intention could there be? Secondly, can art really change the world? Karl Marx would probably have said no, on the grounds that it belongs to the ideological superstructure of a society as an expression of that society's relations of production. Its causal powers are negligible. Nevertheless, the idea of art as having the power to alter our material conditions of life is seductive, especially if you're radically minded, as many artists are. But how plausible is it really? And do manifestos help? I genuinely don't know. I'll leave you to decide. Incidentally, if you're interested in reading Breton's manifesto for yourself, don't go buying it. There are lots of places on the internet where you can download it for free.